Hello, this is Crystal Racing here with the Crystal score for who has been the worst driver this season and who has been the best driver so far in 2019. So, starting off at the bottom, we begin with Carlos Sainz, who starts the season with an average score of 6.00 as he has struggled to make the most out of that McLaren so far. Yes, at times he has shown some flashes of speed, showing that he might be able to fill in that team leader role left behind by Fernando Alonso, but so far it's only a 6. Next up, it's Antonio Giovinazzi, who also gets an average score of 6.00. Very, very slow start, I have to say, whilst he was only about 1 or 2 tenths slower in qualifying compared to Kimi, Australia and Bahrain. He did get knocked out in Q1 in both occasions. China saw him improve he went out in Q1 again in China. This time, however, Kimi got knocked out in Q2, so the deficit wasn't quite as big. But having said that, at no point has Giovinazzi really showed that much speed, and I have to say, I am quite worried about him already. Next up, it's Daniel Kvyat, the returning Toro Rosso driver, who made a strong start at Melbourne with an 8 out of 10. He held on for the final point despite struggling in qualifying. However, in Bahrain, he began to struggle. He got involved in that incident with Giovinazzi where Gio spun him round. It wasn't Kvyat's fault, but he did chop into Giovinazzi a bit too dramatically. And then of course at China, he got involved in that incident with the 2 McLarens. Yes, it was a racing incident, and no, it did not deserve a drive-through penalty. But having said that, he's not exactly been on fire apart from Melbourne so far this season. I have to say his teammate Albon is really, really measuring up very well up against the experienced Russian so far this season. Next up, it's Robert Kubica, the man who has been absent for over 8 years, has gone off to a very slow start, it has to be said. Australia was a very, very, very erratic performance, I have to say. He was struggling with the car's limits and its grip levels, and then apparently he came on the radio and said that, I'm struggling with this car, and he hit the pit wall, he went off the road numerous times. Bahrain saw him close up quite a bit on Russell, although to be fair he spent most of the race in the back. And then, of course, at China, I think he showed quite a bit of improvement. He actually stayed with the pack along with George Russell, but having said that, he needs to improve. Next up is Pierre Gasly, who has had a very, very tough baptism of fire so far at Red Bull. It's very clear to see that he's been promoted at least this season too early. They only brought him in because of the fact they had no alternatives to who they could bring in, and he was very unlucky in Australia where his team only made him do one run, meaning that he got knocked out in Q1, even though he was only a tenth slower than Verstappen. But he lacked aggression in the race. He really did. Bahrain was a real slog. He was about 8 tenths slower than Verstappen all weekend, and he only managed to get 8th place because of the 2 Renaults retiring late on. Quite frankly, and then of course in China, once again, whilst he did qualify 6th and finish 6th, he was almost a second slower than Verstappen. At this point in time, Gasly is facing a real uphill struggle. I mean, it seems to be he is struggling to adapt his driving style to one in which this year's Red Bull RB15 needs to be driven, which is with more aggression and with more steering input. And it does seem to be Gasly is he's a very smooth driver, if you know what I mean. So yeah, next up it's Daniel Ricciardo, who has also struggled, but not to the same extent as Gasly has at their respective teams. Ricciardo has been apparently complaining about the Renault, saying that he can't, carry he can't quite carry the same exit speed like he used to at Red Bull last season. And his start to the year at Australia went off to the worst possible start when he went across the grass and then hit a block of concrete and damaged his car. And even after the pit stop, his car was basically undrivable. Bahrain showed some improvement. He went on a one-stop strategy, but having said that, he was outpaced by Hulkenberg all weekend. And there was an incident where late on in the race, Ricciardo tried to overtake Hulkenberg despite the fact that both of them were on different strategies. Well, was he overtaking? No, he was defending from Hulkenberg, and then Ricciardo tapped his end plate into Hulkenberg's rear tyre. Very lucky that he didn't cause a puncture for his teammate. However, last weekend at China was Ricciardo almost back to his full best again, thanks to an excellent run to 7th place, where he was the best midfield runner all weekend, whilst Hulkenberg struggled with mechanical issues. Next up, it's Sebastian Vettel. Yeah, that's right, folks. I know he's quite far down the list already at this point in the season, but he really is in trouble in quite a few ways. I mean, whilst, he has had the edge on Leclerc in Australia and China, Bahrain was an absolute nightmare for Vettel. Quite frankly, not only was he dreadfully outpaced by Leclerc, but that spin whilst fighting with Lewis Hamilton was absolutely unacceptable. Had he not spun, I am certain Vettel would have been in a prime position to win the Bahrain Grand Prix when his teammate's engine started spluttering. That was absolutely unacceptable. I gave 5 out of 10 and a reject of the race for that performance because it's just not good enough. It's not good enough from a 4-time world champion. Next up, it's Lance Stroll with 7.33. Very, very good start in Australia where he got, he finished 9th place. He did a very fine drive, but however, since then he's kind of gone off the boil already. It seems to be Australia. He took advantage of the circuit's very narrow track surface, and the fact that he can't really overtake Australia, but then at Bahrain he really was dreadfully off the pace. I can't remember him doing anything of note at Bahrain, and then of course at China he finished 12th, 4 places behind his teammate Perez, and to be honest, his qualifying speed is absolutely terrible. If he could sort that out, maybe he might have a chance of scoring points, but at his point, no, he doesn't really seem to be up to much apart from his Australian performance. Next up is Kevin Magnussen. Very, very strong start Australia. Finished 6th. Had a flawless weekend. However, his season has tumbled afterwards at Bahrain at China, where it does seem to be that because he finished outside the points because the Haas's tyre wear is probably the worst on the grid. In front of him, on the same score is also his teammate Romain Grosjean. Grosjean was extremely unlucky at Australia when for a second year in a row his wheel hub came apart thanks to another dodgy pit stop. And just like Magnussen, he's been struggling with tyre wear. So really, I kind of can't really say that much for either of them. I can only hope that Haas can get over this problem. Next up, it is rookie Lando Norris with a very, very solid start to his F1 career. In Australia, he didn't quite manage to drive the most consistent race, but he did show a lot of racecraft when he very smartly overtook Giovinazzi without overdoing it. Bahrain was an absolutely fantastic performance, 10 out of 10. He grabbed P6. He finished as the best runner in Formula 1.5 that day. Absolutely drove with maturity beyond his years, He did that brilliant overtake around the outside on Pierre Gasly earlier on the race with a brilliant piece of improvisation. And I've got to say this, Lando Norris has already impressed me. Next up, it's Sergio Perez, once again on a solid 8.00. I've been quietly impressed. His performance at China, for me, was a very solid drive to 8th place. Whilst Kimi Raikkonen was all over him, he did not put a wheel wrong, although of course it has to be said China's not a very great place for overtaking. And he looks like he's settling very well into his role as team leader at Racing Point this season. Next up is Alex Albon with a 8.67 already. A fantastic start for the Toro Rosso rookie who is driving for Thailand this season. Okay, yes, whilst he did qualify well at Australia, he did struggle in the race. However, thanks to the two Renaults retiring, he scored his first points in 9th place at Bahrain. And then, of course, at China, despite that Saturday morning practice crash, he managed to get his head together and he pulled off that brilliant comeback drive to score a point on Sunday. So yeah, Albon has got a lot to smile about. And then, of course, next up, it's Nico Hulkenberg. A very, very solid start to the season. He made a brilliant start at Australia after he qualified down in 11th and he finished 7th ahead of Kimi Raikkonen. He has outpaced Ricciardo to most extent so far. However, China was a bit of a drop in performance. Of course, mechanical issues didn't help, but Ricciardo does look like he's beginning to find his feet, beginning to slowly find his feet at Renault, and I'm pretty certain Hulkenberg and Ricciardo will have a very, very close fight this season. Charles Leclerc is up next. Yes, so far this season he has been, very much an obedient number 2. Although, of course, that performance at Bahrain could well be a sign of things to come if he can keep it up on a regular basis. However, I'm not going to put too much onus on him. And yes, look, I know what happened at China. He was forced to pull up, let Vettel past, and then he got put on a terrible strategy where he was pitted 4 laps after Vettel had his first pit stops, and then they had to pit Leclerc again late on, and it meant that he got overtook by Verstappen. Very poor, very, very bad strategy there by Ferrari. And indeed, it was very reminiscent of watching Kimi Raikkonen drive for them last season. Funny how some things never change, eh? Ferrari cannot run a 2-car team. I'll just leave that one there. And then, of course, entering the top 5, we have George Russell. Now, I've given him 3 9s for his first 3 performances because I think, that car is masking his skill level, and, he's been very much ahead of Kubica everywhere they've run all so far this season. And, in China, he was actually mixing it up with the other lower midfield runners. So, there is talent there for the 2018 Formula 2 champion. 4th place is Max Verstappen, also with 3 consecutive 9s for his performances so far. He is getting the absolute maximum out of that Red Bull Honda at the moment. It's not the nicest car to drive, but Max really is holding up the flag for the team. Quite frankly, he has to, because, with the way Gasly is going, they really need Max in full gear. And then, of course, next up is Valtteri Bottas. He had that superb win at Australia where he beat Lewis by 20 seconds, although it did emerge after the race that Hamilton was suffering from floor damage, so we don't really know how good Bottas really was, but credit where credit is due. But however, it has to be said though, he has dropped back to being a number 2, so yeah, he's kind of, Mercedes have been doing all these PR stunts with Bottas sticking up his middle fingers and growing a beard, but frankly, I'm not too sure whether I can really buy it. And then, of course, next up, it is Kimi Raikkonen, one of the joint 2 best drivers this season in my eyes. He has absolutely driven the wheels of that Alfa Romeo, despite, lack of practice running at Bahrain and some difficulties in Chinese practice. Kimi Raikkonen has always been there to take the car into the points. What can I say about my favourite driver? He is revitalised. He looks like he's in his element. He has been overtaking cars left, right and centre. And right now, if you take a look at the Formula 1.5 table, Kimi Raikkonen is leading the championship in the Class B category. So yes, I am very happy. And last but not least, of course, Lewis Hamilton is right on top of the crystal score. He struggled with the floor damage in Australia. He picked up the pieces to win in Bahrain, and then he did what he had to do to win in China. And really, frankly, it's about what I expect, to be honest. So, if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to Crystal Racing, and I'll see you again next time.